Hello, hello. Let me get situated before I get into all my action, all my movements. Oh my gosh, look at that smile. There's just no better, man. Look at that Kenzie Dodds. Where is the? Bear with me, folks. I am terrible at this stuff. Looking for it's up in the top left corner. Awesome. The slides are shared. Everybody clap for me. Thank you so much for the applause. Wow. You're welcome. I did it. Anyway, thank you all for showing up today. We are so excited to kick off the AX Developer Series. We're going to be really digging in over the next few months, the next couple of months, really into like AX, AI, why you should care about it, the important pieces, and bringing on absolutely fantastic folks like Kenzie Dodds. We got Sean Roberts mostly leading the charge. They brought me in today. I'm still confused on if they think that was the right idea, but here I am. I'm hopefully going to give you guys a fun show and bring out a lot of gems from these two amazing folks. I really get to work with personally with Sean Roberts, so I get to see a lot of like the behind the scenes of all the work that he does and kind of shepherding AX internally, helping people feel comfortable with using AI and kind of understanding some of the pitfalls that come with it, right? Like there's so much excitement around it, but there's a lot of paper cuts that you meet along the way. And having a Sean Roberts internally is just like mind blowing. And then we've also got Kenzie Dodds. You know, Kent, I don't have to tell you more about Kent, but I'm gonna gush over him for a second because for me, Kent has been such an inspiration. Everybody probably tells him this all the time, and he's so humble that he'll never actually say it himself. But for me, Kent has always been one of those people that you can look to for information. It was front end in the beginning of my career when I was getting into React. I was able to follow him, see his gems, and understand kind of where things were going and where I should be focused to get the right jobs in my career. And then that's also kind of held true as we've moved into like the world of AI with how overwhelming that is. I think it's great to have a shepherd like Kent to make sure that we are at the forefront of these things and don't get run over by them. And I think that's one of the most important pieces of why I'm interested in this series, why this series is important to me, and why it will be important to you. I think this is a really exciting time, and there's a lot of information to grok and understand. And so having people like this at the forefront is so awesome. So thank you for joining me, both of you. I really appreciate you being here. Welcome to AX Best Practices, how developers build for AI agents today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get too deeply into letting everybody introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why they're here. All participants are in listening mode, so you'll be muted, but you'll be able to chat in the chat. Please come into the chat. Please ask your questions. I'll be checking the chat out while they're talking because honestly, I don't have much to give to this. And so I'll make sure that I get your questions to them, make sure that we can get them answered when we slide them in. It's going to be recorded and it'll be shared after the event, so don't worry if you have to head out halfway. I know a lot of this is your work day, so it will be available after if there's any information that you're looking to get that you don't get while you're here. Like I said, Q&A tab, feel free to go and ask questions. I'll be looking. We have someone backstage also who can feed me some questions if I miss them. So don't worry about it. We'll make sure that we get to them. And then please check out the code of conduct. Don't be acting crazy in the chat. You know better than that. Don't make me scold you. I really don't want to. So thank you so much for all coming. I really appreciate it. I've already did a little bit of our introduction of who these two amazing men are. I'm Dom Clark. I work on the education team over at Netlify. I've been here for a while, back and forth. Used to do the Jamstack community when the Jamstack was alive, and now I'm back to help with community as we move into AI, AX, and see what those things look like. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you all for having me as your host, and I hope I give you what you need. Sean and Kent, I already did a bit of an introduction for them, but Sean, if you want to say a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you're excited about for today.
Yeah, totally. I'm Sean. I'm a distinguished engineer here at Netlify, and I help lead our AI and AX program here. So that basically means I'm constantly running around trying to figure out all the cool things we can do for developers and trying to look forward 6 months, 12 months, or more from the industry side as well as the internal business side. So a lot of really cool stuff. And obviously this kind of new frontier with building for AI and connecting the web to agents and solving human problems through that kind of new medium is just super exciting. How we go about doing it is just so new today, and that's really cool. And honestly, also what's kind of been driving me to talk a lot with Kent and follow his work his focus on AI and MCPs and things like that as well. So I'm just very excited about this call today.
Awesome. Kent, tell us a little about yourself. This camera, this camera, this camera. Tell the people what you got going on.
Well, you were just really nice. I have to say thank you so much for all your kind words.
I mean them all.
It's been a pleasure to know you as well, Dom. And I'm always
Thank
excited when we get to see each other in person because you give really good hugs. So
I really pride myself on my hugs. That just hit me internally. Thank you so much.
Good. But I'm thrilled to be invited here today. There's a lot of really exciting things happening right now, and of course, like it's kind of trendy to say that we're going to cut through the hype and get to the practical stuff. But whatever that means, I think that there's a lot of speculation that we can discuss and have in our discussion today. I've been a web developer for over a decade, an educator for that entire time as well. And this is the biggest transition that I've ever seen in the industry, and in particular in user interaction. And that's what's making me most excited.
I love that. Yeah, I think one of the hardest part is how fast you get thrown into shifts like this, right? I think a lot of people who have come into engineering, even in the last 5 years, right, haven't always seen the fast shifts that can happen on the drop of a dime. And I think we're there now. And so it's really cool to have both of you here to kind of help us through that shift and a little bit of that jostling as we all kind of come up to speed with not just like, how we use agents, but how the rest of the ecosystem views agents and what it can be like to get those things working together. So thank you both for being here. I'm really excited to moderate for you guys.
Yeah, man. It's you say that around these kind of fast transitions. I think a really interesting part about this transition we're in now is that it kind of comes off the heels of the transition from the Web3 stuff as well, which didn't quite do the things that the hype was saying it was going to do. And like, oh no, we're going to all have to learn how to do NFTs and all this stuff. And, it's like, there was this weird roller coaster. And then we go into this stuff and it's like, whoa, no, this ride is real. And we really need to dig in. And from the past, it's like, that's been this weird kind of like whiplash of things over the past 5 years or so, which makes this really cool. And
you really got to watch out for those types of hype train type of things, right? Like and a lot of people who are on the Web3 thing jumped ship as soon as they could to the AI space. And like there's something to be said for mispredicting the future. Like that's okay. People are going to get it wrong. But there were a lot of people, I think, in the Web3 space who didn't really even get Web3 either, who jumped into AI and definitely don't get AI either. They're just there because everybody else is there. And so you have to kind of be careful who you're listening to, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really exciting,
right? Like it's like a bit fatiguing to see these things happen and to go through them. And so by the time you get over the hill of the fatigue from the last kind of jostling that happened, you get to the next one and you're already tired. You're already information overloaded. And so it's a lot easier, I think, to be right. You bring up Web3 in its own and it's already easy to question, but you look at the next wave and you're like, okay, well, like I just went through trying to care about the last one. How do I care about this one? I think this one has shown staying power as not only as developers, but in our everyday lives, like people that have no adjacency to tech in my life. I'm sitting there and being like, here's what prompting is. Like, I'm going to teach you how to get the most. And like, that's the non-technical piece, right? Which is, I think, hitting everybody. And then in our zone, kind of being the technical users of this space makes it even more surreal because you know the tools intimately, even if you don't know them at the core level of the ML and how machine learning languages work. You now have a better understanding of at least the tools that you're using and how to grasp them, and that is fatiguing in its own. So I think that's a really interesting piece of this, and why it's so pivotal to have this type of information being shared openly, because we have no choice at this point but to get on the train and learn as much as we can to keep in our careers kind of moving forward. And I think that's a really big piece of this.
Yeah, you know what's kind of interesting is or different this time than with what Web3 was, is the fact that there's already a ton of value being produced. So it's not just a bunch of money going in as speculative value. Well, like that is happening. It's not just that. It's also like a lot of actual tangible value that people are feeling already. For developers, we're feeling that in our editors. And for regular people, like my kids don't say, "Oh, Google that,"
Google that
to get the answer.
Yeah.
They're saying, "Ask AI."
Ask
So there's a lot
ChatGPT,
of,
like it knows. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So there's tangible value here, and that's what makes it different.
I was talking to my stepdad several weeks ago, and he runs his own e-commerce business and things like that, and so he's doing all the web work for it, but he's not a web developer by trade, right? He's they sell scuba gear. He's a scuba store, merchant, and they had to do, he has to update a bunch of stuff every now and then, and it turns out he had been using Bolt and Netlify. And none of my family actually, like, they think I work at Netflix or something, right? And so I'm explaining to them like kind of what the things that we're working on and stuff at work, and he's like, "Yeah, I used this thing," and I was like, "Yeah, that was it. You used let's say Bolt in this case to generate something, got this HTML, hosted it, iterated on it, and then brought that into your site, which is this kind of monolithic thing." And got real value out of it, right? Like, and he didn't have to pay someone to do it. He didn't have to. This would have been a 2-day job for him, and that really allows him to get back to the things he enjoys and focuses on, and like that's super huge for for real driving real value. And like for me, yeah, it's like we're here. It's cat's out of the bag. It's not going away. And to your point, Dom, at least the way I see about it, it's like, our skill sets are changing, not in the way that we are going to have to do less, but like we have to learn how to approach this problem and do more. Like, how do we help serve agents? How do we support them? What tools need to exist?
Yeah, we're not out of the loop in this. We're not removed from the growth of its usefulness. And I think that is such a big piece that I think people sometimes overlook, in that it replaces some of the more menial tasks, is that it also needs a driver still, and needs drivers, and needs multiple. It's not just one developer to rule them all, right? Like, it's not like you have one developer who knows how to use your AI internally and suddenly everyone else is obsolete. It's like there's a lot more doors that it opens. And so it does change the work that we do, and it does change the focus that we have on the work. But the work is still important. And I think that's a really cool piece of it that we get to experience, is we're at the forefront of that precipice. And that's where it becomes the most interesting to me.
And who better to have to help than Kent to help us kind of learn this and educate this next group of this generation of people building in this world.
It's so thankful, because as a React noob in my early career, I felt the same way, right? Like, it's not like you can overlap React and AI, but the movement of React when it first came to the web dev ecosystem was very jostling as well. And so to have Kent there, just constantly providing free resources. Thank you again. I know I always gush over you, but thank you again for making sure that the next wave of developers and the current wave feels equipped at their job for the next step. I think that's so important, and right now especially. So
yeah, that's something that was a huge relief for me when I first got into model context protocol, and thinking about, like, before that, just thinking, oh man, I don't know what developers are going to do in the future. Like, it's just so uncertain. Are we going to hit AGI? What will developers do in that world? Are we not? And like, still, what are developers going to do with all these app generators and stuff?
Yeah.
But with MCP, it's like, oh, okay, now I see where this user interaction model is going. And yeah, maybe AI can kind of write its own MCP servers in some instances, but like it's still like we've been doing this for 3 years now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like, I feel like we're going to get to a plateau eventually
Yeah.
of what it's able to do without, like, it certainly couldn't build a product by itself. Like you mentioned, you had a friend who built a sales page or something with Bolt.
For his
Like
motions,
that,
yeah.
that is very awesome that they are able to do that. But building a full product, that's not going to be a thing that they can do. And I don't expect that will be a thing in the future. So
You
with
still
this
have to
new
have the
user
expertise enough
interaction
to be
model,
able to drive it properly.
yeah, exactly. What's interesting is you can actually see a little bit of a parallel here with the way that content is generated as well. I just posted about this because I've been generating content with AI a lot recently, and you hear that and you're like, oh man, I hate AI generated content. That's the worst. It makes me want to throw up. You're searching for some sort of recipe or something, you land on a site and it's like, this is so clearly generated by AI. What garbage. And that's because it was generated by or somebody had it generated who doesn't understand at all what they're doing. They're just like doing it for SEO juice or whatever. There are entire platforms that are built to generate, like, just look for keywords and then generate stuff that's going to optimize for that.
I see that a lot on
But
LinkedIn.
yeah, exactly. But I also use AI to generate a lot of content recently, but I have experience backing up everything that I'm doing. And so I can point it to the right context. And when I review it, I know what I'm talking about and I know if it made a mistake and I can correct it and guide it. And so I
also
think
has
that
a plethora of your content and your voice to lean on. And that is such a huge part, is the context that it draws from is so important to creating a really like valuable piece of information.
Yeah, basically what I do is I pull up one of my workshops in Cursor, and then I provide Cursor with an article that I wrote before AI was a thing. And I said, I want you to write an article in this style using context from this workshop on this topic. And then maybe here's the docs, like the official docs for this topic as well.
Right.
And then it'll generate something. I can read through it, make sure that things look good. And I have it use completely different examples and everything. And it generates those really well just based off of my workshop material. And I can publish a blog post in 10 minutes. But it's like I get compliments from people on how good the blog posts are. And I'm like, if you only knew.
Like, if only you knew. Yeah, exactly.
That's the primary difference. To bring it back to our original discussion, that's the difference between somebody who's using AI in a domain that they're familiar with and somebody who uses AI just like to throw slop together. Like there's a significant difference in the practitioner who is actually using AI to be effective. And I expect that to continue. I don't think that we are anywhere close to AI being able to make up for some actual practical experience and knowledge.
Yeah. I think that we were talking about it earlier today, and it definitely feels more like being able to hand it off to an intern or maybe someone who's less practical experience. And when you get it back, you got to go through it. you got to make sure.
Well, I think that's a lot of the fear, right? Is like people are like, well, it's just going to generate stuff, and now that exists, and now your agents are going to pick up this slop and regurgitate that as fact. And there's a lot of that. But there's also a lot of usefulness if you know the content that it's generating. And this comes down to the code that you write in your projects. It doesn't always even have to be at the content level. Like people are like, I'm not letting AI write my code. There's no way. I know what I'm writing. And it's like, it can write it like you write it, and then you fix up whatever needs that you have that you see that it's missing. You still have the capacity to get involved with. And I think that's a key piece of that right there.
I find my workflow for content when it comes to AI generation is like, it's almost like caveman speak, where it's just like, I just hit the points that I need it to get to. And AI is really just generating the connective tissue between all of those things and having better adjectives and like, things like that. But, I need, it's not a, hey, go do all this thing. It's, this is the story, the takeaway that I wanted to have to give here. And, help me with the pieces in the middle. And then I am going to still have to review it, because even like take MCP, for example, it's like,
you're not letting anything without a review. Even if it was a human, you're still reviewing it, right? Like,
and MCP, like it really thinks MCP stands for Modern Cloud Platform. It really thinks that, and so it's the little details like that you still got to go through. But anyway, it's
I'm gonna pin in when you have a second. There's a really good question in the chat, and I think it kind of brings me to a question that I had anyway, kind of here in my notes. Chris asked, what are the best practices for including AX on a site today? Are there specifics beyond normal semantic web and meta tags? And I think this is a really good spot, Sean, to speak specifically about like that tissue that you're talking about and where AX starts to really build its importance in this ecosystem that we're starting to see.
Yeah. So just to back up, so for those that don't know what AX is, right, it stands for Agent Experience, right? And it's this kind of umbrella term for how we think about the holistic experience that we give agents working with your website, your web service, whatever. So when you think about developer experience, that's how developers are experiencing, using, and building for your platform. UX is this idea of how the end-to-end user experience is, and then agent experience is how agents are experiencing your site and service. And where that matters is, like we were talking about, when I, as a developer, decide to delegate some work to an agent, that agent might need to go and do something and interact with a service over here or pull data from a service over there. And the experience that it has doing those things can be really good or it can be really bad. And the better it is, the more successful it tends to be. And that allows me to get my job done better, right? So that's kind of what it is. And then, when we think about what are some kind of practical ways to go about it, the way I like to have that conversation is starting with the AX principles, like what things matter when it comes to good AX. And then from there, you can start talking about solutions such as MCP and LM's text and things like that. And so I think the most important, there's a handful of principles. If you go to the Agent Experience.ax website, it kind of covers all of these. But the ones that we'll go over today, there's the human centricity part. I think this is like the most important thing for people to kind of grok, is that humans are still the people we're trying to help support and benefit when it comes to building and supporting agents. Because where agents and bots differ, right, they use very similar technology, but bots are giving value to some third party, some other system outside of your kind of exchange of value, whereas agents are these systems that are working on behalf of your end consumer or your target customer or your patron. They're working on their behalf, and you're trying to support them as they delegate work to an agent. So this human centricity part, you're still building what humans need to solve human problems, and you're supporting the agents that they use to do this. So the question, again, is not, do you want to support agents? It's, do you want to support your end users that decide to use agents to interact with your platform? So that's the human centricity part. Then there's agent accessibility. And this agent accessibility aspect is like, agents can only do the things that you allow it to do. Just like on the human accessibility side of websites and apps and things, is if you don't support their ability to use certain capabilities, they just can't do it. And where this comes up is agents are going to be operating largely off of two things: context data and then APIs to run a workflow or to invoke a specific API. And a lot of those, especially in enterprises and things, have been locked up behind some sort of paywall or some sort of sign up, flow, or APIs. Especially, you tend to see that there's like 10% of a website's surface area and what it can do is externally available from an API. And then the other 90% is like internal APIs, no documentation, no awareness that they exist, etc. And so, I think the most important thing for people to kind of grok is that, do you want to support agents? It's, do you want to support your end users that decide to use agents to interact with your platform? So that's the human centricity part. Then there's agent accessibility. And stepping back and looking at the fact that there are customers that you want to use or to support that use agents to interact with your service, and they want to do these things, you have to start opening those things up so that agents can do those things, either via solutions like MCP or publicly making them accessible and things like that. And then the last thing,
sorry, God.
The last principle I think that really matters for this conversation is the contextual alignment. And this is the idea of being able to give context to agents and doing so in a way that helps the agent, which has been trained on unthinkable amounts of data, and including good, bad, ugly, and everything in between. And so there's just as much context that you need to help teach it to do the right thing, like a new skill, as well as context you should give it to unlearn bad things that it's learned or picked up over time. And so those three principles, so human centricity, agent accessibility, and contextual alignment, those are the three principles that matter the most. And I think the solutions to contextual alignment and accessibility is where we should spend time on, like, because that's going to be where the real meat of this is. The solutions to those things today are going to be MCP servers. It's going to be LLMs tags. It's going to be semantic HTML on your website and clear content. And I was talking to someone the other day. They also work to embed some unlearning and some like frequently asked questions inside of their website, such that they can let LLMs train on that. Even though a human wouldn't need it, the LLMs are training on it. So anyway, it's attacking those three principles is kind of where we should kind of think on how to start solving this.
Yeah, and so for me, I think one of the things I'm most interested about with the interweaving of all of these principles and like what this looks like in practice. For me, you know, Kent, I've been following you and kind of what you've been talking about your kind of North Star of what you're excited about and what you're kind of building towards and how you want to get there. And it's like the idea of Jarvis. And for those that may not know, like Jarvis is the all-encompassing AI that Tony Stark gets to use to do all of the things around him, right? It empowers so much because it has all of the information and all the context. So I'm really interested kind of from you, Kent, like what, you know, knowing all of these principles that we're trying to establish with AX, and then all the information that you've gathered from the work that you've been doing and the learnings that you've been having, you know, what are you excited about, and how are you kind of diving into it yourself and looking to build in kind of this space?
Well, it's a really big topic. There's a lot of speculation involved there as well. The thing to first address, like, why is MCP the solution here? LLM text is a mechanism for getting information into context for the AI, but it's not a mechanism for users to actually let their or have their AI agent perform action. Maybe the LLM's text could say, well, you hit this endpoint and then this thing will happen, but that's not really, there's no standard around that. And we have to remember that LLMs are literally only generating text. That's all that they do, or generating images or whatever. They're generating tokens, and that's all that they do.
Streams of tokens, right? It's just information back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they are not calling your APIs. They are not calling your MCP servers. They're not doing any of that. You have a host application that wraps the LLM, and those two have a contract that's invisible to us. It's through the system prompt or whatever. They have some special format, and the LLM will say, hey, I actually, to be able to accomplish this task, I need this tool called, or I need this context added, or whatever. And the host application has that, receives that as basically a function call. It interprets that as a function call, and then it will go and gather the necessary information for that to happen. Or the user is responsible for adding that context themselves, like bring in the LLM's text, or here's the prompt template from the MCP server or something like that. So yeah, it's important to just remember that LLMs are. It's not like MCP gives an LLM more power or capability or anything. Really, it
It's not
just
taking actions on your behalf. It's just delivering the information around as a contract to these different kind of actions that it needs to take.
Yeah, well, so it's the host application that's making those calls to the tools, and the
Yeah.
host application gets like the tip from the LLM that that tool needs to be called. So anyway, to get to what MCP is all about, that stands for Model Context Protocol. Effectively, like if we take a little walk down history, 3 years ago, like almost to the day, ChatGPT was released, and it blew everybody's mind. Not
Wow.
because this is the first time an LLM existed, because we've had LLMs for a long time, but because it was the first time that a regular person anywhere in the world could use an LLM in a very easy way without having to set up some sort of cluster or something. And that was really impactful because we had the ability to ask questions and get answers. And maybe they're not necessarily the right answers. That has improved over time. But it was just like I was able to have a conversation with it. And that was really, really awesome. But the problem was I couldn't do anything with it. And I had to give it additional context so that I could answer specific questions about my stuff, not just general stuff that was known on the internet. And so the host application started integrating specific tools so that it could start to do stuff like sending emails or getting your emails or setting calendar events or whatever. But the problem with that is that every single integration has to be built by the team at OpenAI or at Anthropic. And so that's just not going to scale very well, especially if you're thinking that, like, now let's imagine you're a software developer that works for your city, and you work on the reservation system for your city parks and pavilions and stuff. And so people are reserving parks for birthday parties and whatnot. How are you going to convince OpenAI engineers to write an integration for your app? That just is not going to happen. And so, okay, well, maybe the agent can control a browser, and that can be how we solve this. So you continue to build your website, and the agent just uses a browser on your website. That is technically possible, and you can do that today, but it's very inefficient and very error prone as well. And so what's better is if we just have a specific standard mechanism for an agent to communicate to our services, and that is what MCP is. It's the Model Context Protocol. And so now the OpenAI developers and Anthropic developers don't have to build those integrations themselves. They can just build support for this protocol, and then any server that supports this protocol as well can be used. And so that means you, as the developer of your city's website, can also add an MCP server or even just an endpoint on your existing website server that supports this protocol. And so similarly to an LLM's text thing, you can have an MCP thing which will allow users to load context into their conversation with their client, and also take action, like actually reserve a pavilion at the park or something. So yeah, Model Context Protocol enables this sort of thing at a foundational standard level. And it's actually, there's so much momentum around it right now too, because Anthropic came up with it and released it in November. And then Google and OpenAI committed to adding support for it. Just yesterday, Microsoft announced that Windows supports it natively, which is just bonkers. And there were leaks of ChatGPT supporting it. Claude.ai supports this. They call them integrations, which is a lot better than MCP servers for regular users. But yeah, still a lot of work to go to make it like get us to that Jarvis experience. But it is. I think we have the technology to do this now, and that's what makes me so excited.
I think there's on that kind of history there. They did solve this problem within ChatGPT by building GPTs and plugins before that. But obviously the problem there is that like it was a very walled garden. This is OpenAI's way of doing this, and zero other platforms we're interested in supporting it, or we're going to support it.
Well, and like it actually didn't solve the problem at scale because like you can just hand it your REST API documentation, but you would have to be very, very clear to
no.
make
I'm
sure
talking
that
about the GPTs that
Hmm.
you build those to integrate with it.
Yeah, like a wrapper, you mean?
No. You can build GPTs, and they were called plugins before that,
Mhm.
which were kind of proprietary format for how they would do MCP-like interactions today. So it
Mhm.
would say, hey, what are your APIs, descriptions for them, the tool calls, all the things. However, I think it was like, to discover it was like a well-known .openai plugin.json or something. You know, it was very
Mhm.
OpenAI's way of doing it. And especially at the time, there was no other Anthropic or Claude as a chat app didn't exist.
Mhm.
Things and so there was nothing to kind of share this or unify here.
Mhm.
But all that to say is like the thing that we're doing better now is that this is not specific to Anthropic either, nor is it specific to any one of them. And that's a very important thing from the open web, open standards perspective here, not just the momentum and what opportunity, but also who's controlling the things and how are we making it better over time, and whose agendas are getting put into those specs, right? So
Yeah, that's a really good call out. That like it really is the difference between the App Store and the World Wide Web, and
right.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think the accessibility that we're seeing coming from the movement into MCP and like how we're trying to standardize it as a way to kind of do all of the things that we needed to do, I think is a really important step forward with at least where we're trying to go with this style of tool calling and weaving these things together. Because I think like one of the most, like as a developer like myself and who's using these tools, right, you only ever think about the one-on-one of it, like I'm using, Windsurf or Cursor, and I'm in here and I'm using a model and it's just me in this model, right? And then the idea of like the web of models and the web of agents that start to interact with themselves, like it starts to become so much that it's hard to start to grok where you should start and things like that. So I think these types of conversations are really important because we've even got people still in the chat like, what does MCP stand for, and how do I design these things, and what does it look like? And so I think that's a really good point of transition here for like, what does that start to look like from a building standpoint when you're using these tools, when you're starting to move into building with MCPs and bringing them a part of your flow and things like that. What does that start to look like as a developer, and how do you handle that?
Well, I think that it can get overwhelming to think like, oh, this agent talks to that agent, and then that agent talks to these three agents, and it just ends up being this really big non-deterministic web. Like, yeah, throw the non-determinism of agents and natural language processing and generation and all of that. It can get overwhelming. So the way that I like to think about it, at least on my end, I'm not actually personally right now very interested in agent-to-agent communication.
Right.
I think that's important, and that's going to be a big part of the future. But my focus is on user to agent, and then that agent to MCP server, like service interaction. And for that, I think of the agent as a human. Like I humanize them a little bit as like a human assistant. And so what does the human assistant need from my service? How are they going to interact with the user? And as a human assistant, like given a prompt of like something that they are expected to do, how does my service play in the number of other services that are going to be used to accomplish that task? And so it's actually very similar to building a website. You're like, I'm going to add this button for this use case, and then we're going to add this drop down so they can select these things and whatever. And you just, when you're building these tools and resources for the user's client to interact with, you're thinking about it in the same way. You're just thinking, instead of the user interacting with it directly, it's the agent that's going to be interacting with it for them, or their virtual assistant. And that kind of helps me clarify, okay, how do I structure my tools? How do I design this so that it can be useful for a user's agent?
Yeah, I think the human centricity part, again, it goes back to that. Like, you should just, like, you're supporting your end user, and they're going to either use it directly in a lot of cases, but we're definitely moving to this world where you have users trying to use it with an agent. And in some cases, there will be people who exclusively use agents. And it was cool, some of the demos that you had done, Kent, around like, there's no UI for this. This is just a service that will only be accessible through an MCP. And I think that I think very specific types of services that'll make a lot of sense. So it's really interesting. From my experience, I've found that, and I personally don't believe MCP is gonna rule the protocol space here. And I don't think that I believe that we have to meet users or and humans on the other side of it where they're comfortable with, right? So we have an MCP server. We also have various integrations that work with Netlify directly, as an example. But we also have different areas where we allow people to copy some context directly. So it's like more recently we added in our feature, it's called Why Did It Fail? And when your build fails, we'll use AI to kind of figure out what happened. And then you can take that information, copy it, and put it into your AI tool editor if it doesn't already have that information in it, and use it to figure out and to fix the problem, as well as learn what happened. And the reason I bring that up is because we have people who take that and then go straight to like ChatGPT with it, or they use Claude Desktop or something, because like they're developing these habits that are very similar to, like, for example, when we would like take an error and then go to Stack Overflow, or take an error and Google it immediately, and they like take some sample context and throw it at these their preferred AI tool of choice. And not all of them are going to support MCP. Not all of them are going to have an MCP set up for a given service, nor should they for everything that they ever want to work with. And so there's many different things that have to line up for MCPs to be the one thing to solve them all. So what I've found is that, again, looking at your users, you should be finding ways to support them in using the tools that they like to use. And I've found that we do have to support 3 different use cases. One is MCP, without a doubt, right? The momentum is undeniable. You should support MCP. And we can get into the tactically, what does that look like? But then there's also, is there self-serve context to give? Like I mentioned, this like copy and paste stuff, like people use it a lot, to our surprise. There was some debate on like, should we even do this? And we turned it on, and there's like thousands of people doing it a week, despite the fact that they could do the same thing automatically in various tools via different integrations. And then we find a lot of support still exists and growing, frankly, for LLMs text. And the way I think about the LLMs text side of things is, to Kent's point, it's not the interactivity tool. It's largely a glorified sitemap, right? But like if you have a moderate to high complex site, which probably means there's more than 4 pages to it, right? Then it starts to have a lot of information density. What the LLM's text is really doing is giving an LLM a snapshot of saying, hey, this is where things are. This is where what you're gonna find when you get there. And depending on the question that you're asking, it helps them filter that stuff down. And so it helps LLMs kind of have this relevancy kind of layer that when you use Google and things like that already have baked in. Like that's what they do all day, every day, is to take websites, figure out the different parts of them, and then extract all the relevant parts that they need to, when people make queries against, how they surface that information. And where LLM's text comes in is like, you have it essentially index your site, build this text file, or this markdown file, and you can give it to an LLM and say, hey, where can I find this information about, again, to continue the Netlify thing, editing environment variables, and it'll figure that out. And then the agent needs to then go and use that information on that page to do something. I think the reason I bring this stuff up is people or agents doing that aren't the agents that are necessarily the same type that would be using an MCP. They're agents that are automating things like at a large scale, and they're behind some other level of agent or something like that, and they need to then answer a query, and they're just going to find the best site to answer that query, pull the LLM's text to figure out where to get the answer, and then pull that answer from there. And they're not really looking to support an MCP layer that solves that. So that's like, those are the three things that we've found, or that I found rather. MCP is super important. Self-serve context is important, and these more static orientation, like how to find the right information type of context that certain types of agents use, are still really important.
I'm curious, Kent, like on the other side of that, where MCP has been your major focus, and kind of like again, like that North Star idea of like how you see the experience of AIs working. What is your take on that, and where MCPs fit kind of into this entire bubble of having, even if those, if those three pieces of idea where AI agents can be useful exist, like, and I feel like I've seen a lot from your content being about how important MCP is to that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. Again, my focus has mostly been on the user's experience, and MCP seems to be the standard that everybody is adopting for that. MCP also does support agent-to-agent communication with a MCP server can actually have MCP clients as well, and the difference there. I'm actually curious, Sean, what your thoughts are on this. And this is a very genuine question. I don't know the answer. I'm not really involved in this space yet. I expect I will eventually get there, but right now I'm just have a different focus. But it seems to me that an agent working on the back end, doing stuff in the background and stuff, maybe it does want to pull information from LLM's text, but I think I would want my agents that are doing those things in the background to also perform actions. And there are other protocols that are available, and honestly, I don't really care which wins in that arena. I don't have a horse in that race right now. But I would like it to be MCP so it can just be the same everywhere. It certainly is not going to be LLM's text to actually perform actions. And I also probably, I suppose I could write handwritten integrations because I'm on the server and I have a set number of tool or things that I want to maybe do for my very specific agent. But yeah, anyway, I'm just curious what your take is on what would you do for an agent that you actually want to do stuff?
It has to be, well, it depends on the stuff that you want to do, right? There is interactivity with a website and a web service, right? And I think MCP is the right thing there. Otherwise, the agent would then have to go to the site, figure out what to do, then do AI code execution of that to then go get a result. There's many layers where this thing can fall down if you've ever tried to do any of it. And so we can do better now, and better today definitely looks like MCP for interactivity, or at least the tool call part of this. But at the same time, not everything needs interactivity, right? I don't need we think about Netlify, for example. There's things as a platform that people should do, but there's also just a lot of documentation around how to generate something. But if I think of React routers docs, for example, I don't think I would be surprised if there was any interactivity, like things that you would want to go do. It's largely helping them get the right context they can to generate the right information. Because we find, there's the data the LLM was trained on, they're on version. The LLM was trained on version 1. The latest docs are on version 3, but the user's local version is version 2. And it's like trying to help end users who are using the various variants of your content still feels like you want to use the web as that source of truth for that information today. And I've just found that like that's where that shines. It's not about the interactivity layer. It's almost like this layer just below MCP. When I think about how we go about building these things, like for productions, sites and services, like the first step that I would take after like auditing, here's the things that it should be able to do and stuff like that, is building up a good kind of context kind of infrastructure, right? Like given your docs or given your API documentation, given all the stuff that is generated around how your service works or how your API works or how your recipes are made, whatever it is, like however you source this data, making it accessible such that you can do things with it. So like, for example, just practically on the Netlify side, right? We have a Netlify docs. We have a separate site that's our open API spec, specs plural. And then we have the service itself, which is a third property, ignoring the marketing side. So the process then is like, okay, we have a lot of great context sitting in various parts. We need to be able to bring those things together such that we can then not only support humans, but also generate the information we need to then give to agents. So we source this information into one place that can be updated when I deploy a docs update, this thing gets updated and so forth. So it's this kind of kernel of all the context that exists about Netlify. And it has its own little index around this is stuff for serverless functions and this is edge functions and so on, right? And then from that, we can then produce the various different parts that we need to then serve the different types of customers that we have. So we use that to produce our MCP or parts of it, right? We use that to produce what will be in the LLM's text for agents that use that. And we do need to study that more, but like not all of them are interested in our MCP. Maybe that'll change over time, but like they go there. So we generate those files. But we can then also generate these self-serve documents where it's like, I just want to know how this thing works. I'm just going to go, copy the markdown version of this page or whatever, and then paste it in my tool that I haven't hooked up my MCP for or whatever. So that's kind of like the workflow that we have to then go and support those. And we found that it is 3 different types of people, 3 different types of workflows that are using those. The MCP one is that very interactive. I'm going to do a deploy, or I want to pull the main the primary context files automatically, for example. It can do all that out of the gate. Then there's those people who are, or the agents that are using LLM's text, and it's not just LLM's text, but like using the kind of static data on the website to field answers for their agents. That supports those. And then the humans that are like self-service, like I'm just going to copy this context and paste it in my preferred tool. It can produce all of this.
From a third party, from my usage of some MCP tools recently, and I think just hearing both of your sides of like how the entirety of the ecosystem is kind of feeling their way around using agents and agentic tools and workflows. I was recently using like database MCPs, right? That were able to do transactions and creations for me and things like that for databases that I haven't used, right? Like as like a way to like see how the feeling of the use of it is. And I think there's 2 sides of it where you as a user are kind of you're either coming with enough context to understand how the tool worked before having to have something that called these actions for you, right? And this kind of goes back to our earlier in our conversation where you're like, along the way, you still have to have some of the context to make sure that the tool calling that you're doing is outputting identically what you're expecting, right? And so having a little bit of knowledge and context there is always useful. But I think there is that weird middle ground, right? Of like, I want to, and this is where the trust comes in, right? Like, I want to trust the tools to have the knowledge to do them themselves, but I also want to make sure that I'm on the other end contextualizing my knowledge of the tool and the product and the services that I'm using, because I think that's another thing too, is that you have a lot of users who are going to be using these MCP tools with services who are just getting started with that service and maybe don't have a great understanding of all of the actions that tool is taking. So I think there is a split road of like still having to come up to speed with a lot of the context of what the service is doing itself versus also just the action of doing the thing on the service.
I think that we're very early in like our workflows here.
Yeah.
And MCP in particular is like just since November. Probably the biggest thing holding things back from the experience that I envision for the future is the client experience. I think that users shouldn't have to configure MCP servers, and that they should be like the LLM should be able to tell the host application, hey, I think I need an MCP server to solve this problem. And then the host application can go and find one and suggest a couple to the user, and then the user can select the one that they want. And then of course it can remember.
And then that would spin up on a service for you for that action, and then be a long-running service that you would use. Or
like, imagine that I've never used Netlify before, and I'm starting to use it today.
Me neither.
I definitely have used it. I'm a very early user of Netlify.
We love you for that.
Yeah, I love it. Still use it. Yeah, so like, let's say I've never used it before, and I'm already like, let's imagine that this Jarvis feature is the present, and so I'm already very familiar with using this. I'm going to go to my AI assistant and I'm going to say, I want to deploy a site onto Netlify. Like, here's the directory that I want to deploy, and it's the LLM will say, oh, well, I don't have anything that I can do to generate those tokens to make that happen. So it's going to let the host application know. The host application goes and finds the Netlify MCP server, and it asks the user, hey, do you want to use this MCP server? Yeah, sure. Like that looks official. Maybe it's got a check mark or something. And now we've got the MCP server. And so if that is the world that happens, I think that's a really great user experience. And we've got some work to do to get there, but that's all client work. So if we get the clients to the point where they can do that, then I'm not sure, like, I guess I don't understand two things. First, I don't understand why this wouldn't happen, because it's just a really great user experience, and there's a lot of momentum going on in the client space right now to get us to this eventuality. And then second, I don't know why we would use anything else, because it's such a better user experience. So I know that we're coming down on our time here, but I've got a lot of things that I am thinking about for the future, and nobody can really predict what that future is actually going to look like. But we're
all running down the hill together, right? Like, that's where we are.
I've bet pretty heavily on MCP being a major part of that, whether it is the one protocol to rule them all or anything like that. I don't think is actually really, it doesn't necessarily have to be that to be a really
just
huge
the
value.
Idea, the concept.
Yeah, it's already a huge value. And so I actually just today listed another workshop for anybody watching who wants to learn about MCP. Go to epicai.pro and join me for my workshop next month to get you into the MCP world, because I think that it's certainly here to stay. And I think that it is going to be a big part of how we build our user interactions going forward.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't think we're on different sides of the coin, Dom. I think
I think that it's not different sides of the coin, but I think we're both thinking about the end user and how they have the most possible success. And I think that there should be, it's not two opposite sides. It's working from two ends to make the center the best that it can be. And I think that's a big, it's not a diffusion of thought.
Yeah.
It's a, how do we grasp all of these? Because that, like to Kent's point, we're running down the hill at full speed right now. And if everyone was just thinking the same way, we might miss things. And I think that's why it's important to have these discussions as openly as we have.
Yeah. I agree with Kent, like that, the ideal experience here. Like I want it to be more like we lean into the web for the directory versus other versions of registries. Like when in this example of like, hey, I want to deploy to Netlify, it should be like, oh, they probably mean netlify.com. And then it goes and looks at like, let's say mcp.json or something and figures out what it needs and then on demand installs and runs those things. Yeah, 100%. Like that's what I'm imagining as well. What I think I'm really interested in figuring out is I feel like there's this layer that exists between what sites do today and what agents want, and it glues those things together. So what I'm afraid of and what my fear with what will slow down progress is having to have people build more at layers for MCPs or for agents directly versus finding a way to have MCPs and things fit more ergonomically into what they do today. And I know that those things can happen. And like when you invest enough time into it, it kind of works. But I think that there is this kind of opportunity to have this kind of, well, what should the web do in order to support agents really well? Because I think MCP from my side is like it's a really agent to service focused kind of model, and I'm really curious about like as a web producer, what could I be producing such that it just supports MCP, it supports this other thing, it supports this other use case, and like I'm not having to say like today as an example, the three things that we end up having to build. I had to build all three of them initially by hand and writing them with AI helping me produce them. and it was like, well, this isn't going to scale. And then especially at the time, right? Like MCP wasn't so, had as much traction. So it's like, okay, is another thing going to come out next week that we're going to have to support this other thing and stuff like that? And so to Ken's point, like I want us to converge on something, but I also want to see, I think that there's this nascent, undiscovered layer here between web architecture that exists today to then meet agents together. That's not just like build an MCP and everything's solved for you. I think that there's something else that fits there that helps MCP be successful, but it can also do other things in addition to that.
What is that?
Oh, God.
So what I'm thinking right now is like, for example, context, for example. I don't think that MCPs are good at delivering context. I think they functionally deliver context fine, but having to have a web server host it is kind of nonsensical to me. In that, like, I would rather it be CDN side, cacheable, and cheap for me to deliver static context, and it's not today. And allowing those things, let's say that that's true, right? Okay, now I can produce these, resource files and then point towards them. Am I then going to go and then build that specific file for that specific context? No, I don't think so. I think that we need to be able to go from what we're doing today on the web to producing the artifacts that are optimized for agents and LLMs. And then those things need to connect with protocols such as MCP, right? So as an example there, I should be able to produce on my main documentation site, I should be able to produce a human version from some content, a markdown version from some content, maybe a one that's, not even human readable because it's been optimized for LM. It's like an embedded version, with embeddings and such, vectorized version. But it still fits within the protocols that support delivering it. And then we can use things like content negotiation. So I say, hey, Claude, I want to deploy this thing to Netlify. And it reaches up and it says, hey, we have to do X, Y, and Z first. But the context that it got to do that was the smallest, easiest to parse content that it could from my website. And it was just easy for me to build and host. That was a lot of words. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like that layer that should exist between what we do today and between these protocols that optimize it for both the web side and the agent side.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense for the way that things are right now. As an educator, I have to be very well, and I think everybody has to weigh how important it is to support the current world versus invest in the future world, and we have to do a little bit of future prediction, which is of course going to be a challenge. But for me, with the amount of effort that I put behind the content that I produce, or at least the workshop material and things, I'm not going to take any time to teach people how to build all three of those different mechanisms or anything, because I don't think that the future has that. I think that we will consolidate on MCP. And so that's part of why I'm so focused on MCP, because maybe teaching people how to build for all these different consumption models makes a lot of sense right now with the way that things are now. But I think that in 6 months, it will look completely different from the way that it is right now. And so if I had infinite time, then yeah, of course, I would teach people how to do all of those things right now. And I think that it could be valuable for some people. But I don't have the infinite time, so I have to make a decision. And that's why I've chosen to go on MCP. I do think that it's capable of doing everything that you've said. The clients aren't all there right now to make it really good, or at least make it really easy. But I don't know, man. Right now, I don't want to say the name of a competitor on your show, but you do have a competitor that I use, and they make this actually pretty easy and really affordable for me. So I think that's only going to improve even on Netlify as well. And so I'm pretty invested in MCP, and maybe this is a little bit of the ostrich head in the sand on those other things. I completely acknowledge that I could be wrong on this, but I think MCP I think it is the end-all protocol for user interaction. It can do all the things.
Oh yeah. So that fundamentally, that's where I would disagree. There's no way. For me, that sorry, not that. It's not the end-all be-all protocol is what I'm getting. I think that there will be reasons to support more, and while they can, I don't think that. What I do know is people want things to be cheaper and more reliable, and hosting services, regardless of how cheap the plan is that they kind of give you to kind of give you the hook at a competitor. The expectation that, hey, I should be able to just host a static file and I shouldn't have to run a server 24/7 to give that. And those types of things. I think that, but let me back up here. I think MCP needs to change pretty drastically to be better. And I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, I would agree, and I believe that it will evolve to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think we're both trying to help where we can there as well. But I definitely see the opportunity for I very similar to hey, we're only gonna have one version of the HTTP protocol. I wouldn't bet on that either. And that was a good bet. We have multiple versions of it, and they're better at certain use cases than others. And that's why I wouldn't say that we should build things to only expect that there'll only be one protocol. I think that that's going to be short-sighted.
When you say multiple versions of HTTP, maybe this is me revealing some foundational knowledge that I'm missing. But are you just talking about HTTP versus HTTPS? Or like, are you talking about HTTP 1, 2, 3, 4? Like, what
Precisely,
do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
well, sure.
and
like
well, things like UDP as well, and it's like there's different protocols for different.
Well, yeah, sure. But like under the hood, MCP is using HTTP for remote servers. So like of course, it's not going to be the only protocol to serve everything. I wouldn't expect that. And I do like I can appreciate the idea that like hosting a static file on a CDN also really valuable. I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that. Even if you do have a server running all the time for dynamic content, you can still add cache headers for retrieving that information. We have embedded resources and things that we can do with a protocol now, and those will only improve as the clients consume those better as well. Like you can include an HTTP resource, and that can be a cached thing. So like, yeah, the protocol needs to evolve further. Like in particular, I think we need to have UI support in the protocol as well.
For sure.
So agents aren't just a bunch of text. But yeah, I just, I don't know. Like I acknowledge that the MCP protocol will evolve, but I think that it will.
I think so. I think for me, this is a great point of interest kind of towards my point earlier, where I wasn't creating a rift between the ideas, but that I believe that there is a very strong need to have all of this context while building for this eventual future. And I think for me, outside of this, right, as somebody who isn't actively building on MCP and looking to further it, or, you know, obviously I have Netlify's interests in mind when I'm thinking and building on these tools. But I think for me, just as a developer, as Demetrius Clark, right, like this is the exciting stuff that I get to watch kind of from an inside and outside point of view, where to your point, Kent, right, like who knows the eventuality? 6 months from now, everything could be similar. It could be hopefully better. It could be more convoluted. There's a lot of convolution that could be entered into this. And so I think for me, from a third party perspective, and maybe some of the chat can agree, it's really great to have people who are thinking so deeply and thoroughly about these futures. And so I thank you both for doing that for us and you know, obviously for the companies that we work for, but realistically, it's all towards a better future, hopefully using these tools. And so, you know, I just wanted to say, thank you guys both for sharing such deep and interested opinions on the future of these things, and also working on ways for it to be better for all of us to end up using them eventually.
Yeah, and I think I would be bummed if we were all totally aligned, probably.
Exactly.
Like, I think we got to find some rough edges to smooth out for it to get better and better. Hell, I can think of a few protocols that are 20 plus years old that have a lot of growing to do still. So I think that we can we're lots to improve over time. Yeah, I think I'm really looking forward to the Kent. Sorry, Kent dropped, I think, but
yeah, that was weird. Sorry.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, I get totally whiplash.
It's just a little Kent peekaboo.
Yeah. This is Kent's AI avatar.
When the call gets too long, it pops up with an AI Kent that we all don't know about.
But this has been great to like kind of work through this stuff, and I'm really excited to see the courses and stuff that you're making, Kent. Like I said, like I've benefited from them. It says Dom and
I actually linked the link that you shouted out earlier, Kent, in the chat, so people could go and check that out, because I think that's going to be a great resource eventually.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know, your camera's not there anymore, Kent. But
can you not see me still? I can.
We can't see you, no.
It's a black screen.
Oh, gee. Here, let me turn it off and on again.
There he is.
Okay.
He is. Even if you just had your picture up again, if it just like mouth moved a little bit, I'd believe it. Yeah. So Kent, any last words before I start wrapping it up?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and it's always fun to talk about the future. And we'll see how wrong we are in 2 months, probably.
I'll reference back to this in my face as we're going through all these topics. But
we'll
yeah,
see you at Render, and we'll figure out where we're all at that point.
That's true. I just wanted to say a special thank you to you, Kent, for coming on, sharing your thoughts, and I know how busy you are, and so we really appreciate just having you on. And dude, like I said, every time, I love spending time with you, man. So thank you so much for coming by, and we hope to see you again, Kent.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time.
See you later, Kent. All right, everybody, I am going to just real quick do some wrapping up here. Right now, we're going to try and share again, is my hope. Yeah, we're going to share screen. Look at me. You need AIs to do my job, to be honest. Thank you all for coming to the inaugural AX Discovery Series episode. Sean, thank you so much. You left before I got to give you a thank you, but seriously, thank you so much, Sean, for putting this together, having me on, and letting me moderate between you two. It was such a pleasure. I had so much fun. I tried to get into the chat with you all. This is it's like I had to pay attention here, right? Like I'm you all in the chat. Imagine me in the chat. That's how this is. So yeah, I just wanted to do a shout out really quick to the series itself and what you can expect in the coming months. So we have, obviously we've finished our best practices, our AX practices developers built for AI agents today. Coming up next, we're going to be hanging out with Sean Zeno from Resend, the CEO of Resend, and Ron Bronson. We're going to talk about AI agents in the web, how developers can build smarter with agent experience. This is going to be on June 24th, so definitely go and register for that. The link is below, as you see. And then on July 22nd, a month from then, we're going to be looking at how developers are building for AI agents, lessons from Windsurf. And that's going to be with Kevin Hu from Windsurf. We're going to be one-on-oneing him and Sean and Kevin to kind of dig into Windsurf and how it's built into what it is and some of the intricacies that have gone into that. And so definitely go and register for those events. You're not going to want to miss them. Hopefully you see me again in one of these. I love hanging out with you all and hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much for coming out. We can't appreciate you more. We hope to see you around the web. So everybody, you have a great rest of your week, great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the web.